The year was 1988. I was a freshman in college. I'm 52 years old. I'm going to save you from doing the math because I want you to pay attention to my story. And I went on a date with this lovely young lady, and we went to the beach, and it was about 45 minutes from my house. This is up in Michigan. And we were driving back from the beach, and it started to get dark, and that was a problem because I didn't usually drive this car in the dark because my car had no headlights. Some alternator problem. It was an old Chevy Chevette, but we stayed at the beach too long because, we were falling in love. And driving home, it got dark, and suddenly it became a real problem because as we're driving, I couldn't see anything. And I looked over at this lovely young lady, and I said, "It's going to be all right. Don't worry about it. I've done this before." I hadn't. And I could have pulled over. I could have, called for some help. I could have had a friend come and rescue us, but I decided to do it on my own. And just driving, and the only thing I had to guide me on the road were the oncoming lights of the other cars. As long as they stayed on my left, and as long as there was somebody coming, then I could get home. Luckily, I did get home safely. We both survived, and then I married that girl. Yes, thank you. Despite my foolishness and despite putting in her such danger, she trusted me. It's dangerous to navigate in the dark. You could get in real trouble. That's true in the physical world, but guess what? It's really, really true in the spiritual world. And a lot of people are living in the dark, and they think it's just fine. And it's crazy because in this world we have light all around us. I'm speaking spiritually. And there's a church on every corner, and there's opportunities to see the light, but some people still choose darkness. Christmas is an amazing time because at Christmas, it reminds us of a couple things. Number one, we don't have to stay in the dark. And number two, Christmas reminds us, if we found the light, we need to share it with others. And so today I want to talk about this light. I want to invite you to receive it if you haven't. And I want to encourage you with some ways on how you can share it. Many of you know that my wife and I, we love to go on hiking trips. We do this every single summer. And one of the things is, you'll hike all day long and you'll arrive at a campsite there and you start to set up your tent. And there's usually several other tents around. And everybody's tired from walking and they just really want to get to sleep. And so they set up their tent and everybody just kind of goes into their own little dwelling places. But I really enjoy, part of the experience that I enjoy is getting to know some people. And so what we'll usually do when we get there is I'll start a campfire, okay? And I'll start a nice little fire, and there's usually some opportunities to sit around it. And you know what we find out? When you start a campfire, the people will come out of their tents to come hang by the fire. It's interesting. The fire kind of draws you out. If it's the light, it's the warmth, it's the conversation. But that light draws people. And this is my first point this morning. True light will draw us in. True light will draw us in. In the same way, God is calling to us, drawing us through his Son, which is the true light. Look at the screen for a moment. This is John 6:44. Jesus says, "No one can come to me unless the Father who sent me draws him, and I will raise him up on the last day." You are drawn here this morning for some reason. All of you who are sitting here, all of you who are watching online, it's no accident that you're here at this moment. There's a reason. Now, maybe you're here because somebody invited you. Maybe you're sitting next to that person right now because they said, "Hey, come to church with me. Let's go to church this morning." Well, that's no accident. I believe God is drawing you to him. As a matter of fact, if you're sitting next to that person, take a quick look at him and say, "Hey, thanks for inviting me here," because that means they care about you. They want you to experience the light in the same way that they're experiencing the light. Maybe you're drawn here for a different reason. Maybe it's because it's the holiday season and something about this season sort of draws you to God. That's okay. You know, if you're one of those individuals that attends church just a few times a year because it's the holidays, don't feel bad about that. We're glad that you're here. God has drawn you here for a reason. Maybe you're here because you're going through something. That happens quite a bit. Like, I better get back to church. I'm struggling with something. It could be a financial issue and you just feel like, you know, everything's against you. Could be some kind of an emotional struggle, maybe a hardship with your family. Maybe you're just feeling lost. Maybe you're feeling like you're in the dark and you're looking for an answer. If that's why you're here, you're in the right place. God is drawing you to Him. Don't dismiss the reason you're here. Don't think, well, it's just a coincidence. It's not a big deal. No, you're here on purpose. God does everything on purpose. If you've been wanting to know what the answer is to maybe some of your challenges, some of your struggles, I'll say this, it starts with Jesus. The answer starts with Him. It starts with the light. John chapter 1, verses 6 through 8. Let's continue in this passage. The writer John here, one of the disciples of Jesus, put this down in the very beginning of his book for a reason. Verse 6, he says, there was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to bear witness about the light, that all might believe through him. Now listen to this, verse 8. He was not the light, but came to bear witness about the light. Now, why does John have to sort of mention that John the Baptist is not the light? He specifically comes out to say, okay, this guy's not the light. He's here to talk about the true light. The reason is, in the first century, people thought John the Baptist was the light. They thought he was the Messiah. They were following him. And so John goes, no. That's not the real light. That guy may have light in him, but he's not the light. This guy only came to talk about Jesus, who is the light. Do you know this? And this is going to sound crazy to you. Do you know that John the Baptist still has followers? There are people in this world who still believe John the Baptist is the Messiah. They're called the Mandeans. Sounds like a Star Wars thing, doesn't it? The Mandeans, they live in Jordan, Syria, and Iran. And to this day, they believe John the Baptist is the light. Now, John the Baptist went out of his way to say that he wasn't the light. He even said, look, I'm not even worthy to tie the sandals of the guy who is the light. He was here to simply bear witness to the light. Here's my second point. You can write this down if you're taking notes. The true light will lead us. The true light will lead us. Any other light besides Jesus is not the true light. For example, John the Baptist, not the true light. Or anything else you can think of, not the true light. Despite the fact that sometimes we try to create our own temporary versions of light to follow. Let me show you an example. We're going to cut all the lights in the room right now. All of the lights. Don't turn on your phones or anything like that. It's pretty dark in here for the most part. Let's see if we can cut the screens as well. If maybe just go to black on those screens. It's reasonably dark. I can't see my notes anymore. In the dark, you struggle to see. And so you say, let me create my own light for a moment. Oh, I can see just enough. Forward. A lot of people create their own light. The problem with their own light is, number one, it's limited and it's temporary and, ow! It only lasts for a moment. Some people create their own light. Maybe it's relationships that they think are missing. And that will last for a while, but eventually it goes out. Some people think it's financial. And so they create their own light, financially speaking. Finances are not my thing. You know, for some people, it's actually religion. That one goes very fast. You know, you see people doing this all the time. You know, it could be just about anything where they try to create their own light, and they find out, number one, it's very limited, it's not bright enough, and it only lasts for a moment. But John said, in him was life, and in that life was the light of the world. We can bring the lights back up. When Jesus said that he was the light, it was significant, and I want to show this to you. Just don't lose your place in John chapter 1, but just turn over to John chapter 8 for a second. John chapter 8. Verse 12. Jesus said, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. Now, let me give you a little cultural context to this statement because it's actually real significant. Jesus was teaching in the temple at this time during the Feast of Tabernacles. Now, the Feast of Tabernacles is a feast that the Jews still celebrate today. Sometimes it's called the Feast of Booths or the Sukkot. And it happens usually in September, October, somewhere around that time. And it was a celebration of the fact that God led the Jews out of Egypt. And at the temple, in the court, there would be 4 very large pillars, 75 feet tall. They were kind of like candelabras. Imagine these big sort of, actually the best way to imagine is like the Olympic torch. Imagine 4 of those really tall in each of the corners. And what would happen is one of the priests, the younger priests, would climb these. There was a bowl on top. It was filled with oil. They would light those during the festival of the tabernacles. And those lights would illuminate the whole temple. And they were representative of the fact that when God led the Israelites out of Egypt, he did so during the night by a pillar of what? Fire and a cloud by day. And so that was representative of God. Jesus was in the temple, standing in the middle of those lights when he declared to everybody around him, I am the light of the world. Oh, wow. Whoever follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. I just want you to try to visually imagine these giant flames and Jesus standing in the middle and not saying, I am a light, I'm one of the lights, I'm a part of the light. No. I am the light. At that point, Jesus was saying, look, I am the one who led the Israelites out of Egypt. Yeah. And I am the one that will lead you.
Yes, thank you, Jesus.
Let me ask you this question. What light have you been following so far? What is the light source in your life? I'm speaking spiritually. Has it been something other than Jesus? For a lot of people, they try everything before they can get to Jesus. It might be finances, it could be relationships, it could be friendships, it could be your business or your career, it could be your children, could be religion itself. Could be another religious leader. Are you following Jesus? Are you following the true light? Anything you follow besides Jesus, number one, will be temporary and will lead you astray. Let's continue back in John chapter 1. Starting at verse 9 now. John says, the true light, which gives light to everyone, was coming into the world. He was in the world, and the world was made through him, yet the world did not know him. He came to his own, and his own people did not receive him. Now listen to this. But to all who did receive him, who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God, who were born not of blood, nor of the will of the flesh, nor of the will of man, but of God. My third point today, true light heals us. True light saves us. It's not so strange to think that light heals. As a matter of fact, there's a lot of opportunities in our physical world for light to be healing. Maybe you've seen those red light therapy things that they might use maybe on their muscles or something. Or if you had a baby and the baby was jaundiced, they use this light therapy. Have you ever seen that? It's a little light therapy that they put on the baby, and it helps, well, I don't know what it does, but apparently it works. Being without light can have an effect on you, spiritually and in the real world. I was mentioning being in college. I went to college up in Grand Rapids, Michigan. I've heard this. I'm not 100% sure if it's true. It seems true. But Grand Rapids, Michigan is the second cloudiest place in the nation. I think there's Seattle, and then there's Grand Rapids. Apparently, they tell people who struggle with skin cancer, that's the place you should move because there's the least sun there. And it seems true. It has to do with the way the weather comes over Lake Michigan and it forms clouds. And Grand Rapids is essentially right next to Lake Michigan. And so it seems like for 8 to 9 months out of the year, it's cloudy. And guess what? People get depressed. I remember that feeling. And there's an official diagnosis. It's called seasonal affectedness disorder. I think that's right. Seasonal affective disorder. SAD. S-A-D. They really worked on that one, didn't they? To get that just right, SAD. But it's a real thing. If you don't see the sun for long enough, like something happens in your body and you need some chemicals. And so they have this stuff called light therapy. You have a light box. I worked for a few years at a psychiatric hospital, and we would have these light boxes that we'd give to patients. And for 30 minutes a day, 3 to 4 times a week, they would wake up in the morning, they would turn this light box on and just let it just bathe their face in light. And what would happen is the brain would then send signals into the body and produce vitamin D and some other things. Matter of fact, being outside is good. Being in the sun for a little bit is good. You need that. It produces vitamin D. And that's a good thing for you. So light does heal. But then there's something besides this seasonal affective disorder. There's something that I call spiritual darkness disorder. SDD. And that's worse. Seriously, because maybe you used to have that. Maybe you were walking around the darkness. Maybe you know somebody who's got that, and they're in the dark even to this day. There's a cure, and it's Jesus. Let's look real quick at John chapter 12. Again, we're in the book of John still, but just let's turn forward to the 12th chapter and look at some more words that Jesus spoke as he was teaching. John chapter 12, and we'll look at verse 35. So Jesus said to them, "The light is among you for a little while longer." He's talking about himself. "Walk while you have the light, lest darkness overtake you. The one who walks in the darkness does not know where he is going. While you have the light, believe in the light, that you may become sons of" what? Light. Sons of light. Or sons and daughters of light, obviously, too. Jesus is saying, I'm here. I'm the light of the world. You have an opportunity to believe in me. While I'm here, walk in the light. Because if you don't have the light, you cannot be sons and daughters of light. You are sons and daughters of what? Darkness. That's a serious problem. God allowed Jesus into this world, the true light, so that he could give us the full measure of healing. The cure to darkness is light. The cure to spiritual darkness is Jesus. Yes. Are you walking in that light? Are you allowing Jesus to lead you? Let me put it another way very clearly. Are you a believer in Jesus? Have you given him control over your life? Have you repented of your sins and turned toward him and made him the Lord in your heart? Or are you still in the dark? We have light here. You can see it. There's lights here, light here, light here. But we also have light here. I would guess that most of the people in this room have the light of Jesus. And you can have that as well. One final question I want to ask you. For those of you that have the light in your life already, are you prepared to share the light? Are you prepared to share the light? Do you remember what it was like before you found Jesus? Do you remember walking in the darkness? Do you remember being confused? Do you remember trying to create your own light, your own false light that was temporary and limited? Do you remember what it was like to have spiritual darkness disorder? That's a term I just made up, but we've known that as being lost. You'd say, oh, that individual's lost. That individual's unsaved. Who do you know that is spending their life in darkness? Who do you know that is lost? Are you prepared to share your light with them? See, when you follow Jesus and you become a child of the light, that light lives in you. It's a gift, it's a blessing, but it's also a responsibility. Jesus said, you are the light of the world. Let that light shine for all to see. He said, nobody takes a candle and lights it and then puts a basket over the top of it. Instead, you let that light shine for everyone. He said, you put that light on a stand in the middle of the room so that it can give light to everyone that's in the room. Christmas is a great opportunity to put your light on a stand. Christmas is the stand. It is the platform that you can use, so to speak, to point other people to Jesus like at no other time in the year. Remember John the Baptist? He was not the light, but his job was to what? Point to the light. That's our job at Christmas time. We're not the light. We need to point to the light. So what I want to do is just finish up by giving you 5 ideas on how you can bear witness to the light at Christmas. How you can put that light on a platform, on a pedestal. How you can use Christmas to do that. Here's the first one. These are just simple ideas. Live generously at Christmas time. Be generous. Now, maybe some of you are already doing this. I mean, we saw that we adopted 15 young adults from Embrace Families as a foster agency. And all of the things the kids asked for, they received. All of them. And extra money, too. Yeah. Thank God for that. That's your generosity. But allow that to flow outside of the building. When you go out to eat, for example, why not just leave a great tip? Live generously. Now, you don't know. Maybe the people know you're a Christian. Maybe they don't. Maybe they heard you talking about something, but that's still your opportunity. Live generously. And by the way, don't limit that to Christmas. I don't know. Sometimes we're very generous around Christmas, and that's a good thing, but we can be generous the whole year long, too. Number 2, invite someone to church. Invite someone to church. I know sometimes that's difficult to do, right? Because you don't know where they stand. You're afraid that if you do something wrong, it's going to get political, and then they're not going to, I know it's weird right now. But at Christmas time, it's easier than ever to invite somebody to church. I mean, a lot of people will go, okay, yeah, I'll do that. 9 out of 10 people will attend a church if they say they're 9 out of 10 people will attend church, they say, if they're invited to attend church. So invite someone to church. Christmas Eve is going to be a great service, and we would love to see you invite somebody. Grant forgiveness. That's a great way to put your light on a pedestal. And sometimes at Christmas time, that's the most important thing you can do. Family issues kind of tend to surface at Christmas time. Relationship challenges sometimes at Christmas time. Maybe there's somebody this Christmas, you can give them the best gift they ever had. You could grant them forgiveness. Or you could apologize to somebody. Maybe this year you need to apologize to somebody. Number 4, you can humble yourself. You can humble yourself. Maybe that means serving another individual. Could be inside the church, could be outside the church, could be at home. You could serve your wife or your husband. If they're not a believer, you're putting your light on display when you serve them. Maybe it's in the community. There's an opportunity to serve. There's usually plenty of opportunities to serve in the community, but that shows people that you have the light and you're willing to give it away. And lastly, tell your story. Share the gospel with somebody. You know, I know that's not easy to do, but if you have a relationship with somebody and you trust them and they trust you and you consider yourself their friend and vice versa, you can say to them, hey, have I ever told you about how I received the light? Have I ever told you about when I decided to trust in Jesus? Have I ever told you how important Jesus is in my life and why I think that you can have that too? You're just telling your story. You're not trying to convince somebody of anything. You're not hitting them over the head with the Bible. You're just telling your story. Live generously. Invite someone to church. Grant forgiveness. Humble yourself. Tell the story. Those are obvious ways to share the light. I hope this Christmas is going well for you. I hope that you've been able to take some time during the busyness of the season to thank God for the light, to thank God for Jesus. One thing, just remember, Christmas for some people is difficult. They could be struggling. For some people, this is the first year they're celebrating Christmas without a loved one. For some people, this is the first year, or this is one of those times of the year where they tend to feel isolated, or some past trauma comes up that involves family, or they're just going through a difficulty. Share your light with them. Allow Jesus to bless them through you. And don't forget to share the light with everyone that you meet. Let's pray.